Buenas tardes. Welcome to Los Angeles. We are so proud that you're here with us in my hometown. For those of you who are wondering why there's a parrot here, ask an Angelino sitting next to you and they'll tell you why. So yesterday, I had the honor of hosting a very powerful hearing. For 6 hours, we listened to testimony from those Angelinos who have experienced their rights being violated through detention and those who try to help them. We heard from lawyers and advocates, and as I shared yesterday, it really told the story of how this community came together in response to an occupation that was taking place. And the resilience and the power of our unity was in full display. I had never been prouder to be an Angelino than I was during those periods in time where we demonstrated not only to the rest of the country, but to the rest of the world, what it looks like to stand in unity. That hearing was prompted by the insights and the brilliance of two people. And so I'd like to invite them up on stage and share with all of you why this is so important and why we need to continue to tell these stories to ensure that there is justice. Please join me in welcoming on the stage Chair of the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights and the President of the Civil Rights Project of Texas, Rochelle Garza. And also with us is someone that we all know, President and CEO of the Hispanic Federation, Frankie. I called him just Frankie because everybody knows who you are, Frankie. So many of our families come from Latin America, from countries that have experienced dictatorships and authoritative governments. And I'm curious about what inspired you to have these hearings in that context. Through those periods of time and then after, there are often inquiries to try to understand what happened, to tell the stories of those who were detained and abused, and to bring about real accountability. Those societies were eventually forced to confront the difficult questions of what happened, who was harmed, and who was responsible. In many cases, accountability was only possible because people created a public record that could not be ignored, denied, or erased. So share, when you both thought about doing these hearings, what ultimately is this about? You want to start, Rochelle?
Sure. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. The hearings really came about from a conversation that I had with Luis Miranda. And he was like, we have to talk to Frankie. we need to have a conversation. And we brought in Catherine Pichardo from Latino Victory. And the conversation was about meeting the urgency of the moment and documenting what we were seeing across this country. Because the reality is that the government was telling us and continues to tell us to not believe what our eyes can see. We are in a moment of universal deceit, and telling the truth is a revolutionary act. And that's what these hearings is about. It's about accountability. It's about making sure that we are telling the story of what our communities have experienced, to document it, to make sure that that history and this chapter is, one, not forgotten, but that accountability comes from our community's voices. That the folks that harmed us aren't the ones setting the agenda. They aren't the ones saying what happened. And I'm very fortunate to have, Frankie as a partner. Frankie is somebody who understands the vision. I'm very fortunate to have the support of the Texas Civil Rights Project and the team, and also to be in the position that I am as chair of the Commission on Civil Rights, and being able to use that platform to listen and to take it back to my fellow commissioners so that we can actually do something about this.
Miguel, you started the conversation referencing some of our painful histories in Latin America. And what is happening right now is eerily similar. The stories that we were able to document in St. Paul, Minneapolis, Chicago, and now yesterday here in Los Angeles is a system of terrorizing communities, destabilizing the nonprofit sector. It is about torture in a prison system that is continued to be built. It is about the violation of civil rights, disappearing human beings. It is so eerily similar to what happened in many of these countries, of our countries of origin. But the difference here is that because of the visionary leadership of Chair Garza, she came to us and she said, we cannot wait until this passes. We need to act now. We need to document it now. We need to make sure that these memories are not erased. And I have learned through this process that everything that you may have heard in the news is a sliver of the horror and the pain that people are living every single day. And until you hear these testimonies, you are not going to believe the pain and the trauma. It is important for us to be able to say, yes, Rochelle, we're going to do this, that we can act and make these decisions, not to wait 12 months, not to wait for some sort of analysis, not to wait for the next board meeting. It's the moment that we need to just act right now to make sure that we are documenting these horrors and hopefully get justice and accountability for everybody that has been abused, disappeared, and even killed through this process.
That deserves an applause. What's really impressive is they've had hearings already in Minnesota and in Chicago, and already a report has been produced. Frankie, where can they find it?
Well, some of you have a card on your, I believe that we're seeing the QR code on the screens, but at the same time, you have a card on your table. You can scan the QR code or go to HispanicFederation.org to download the first report. What we are trying to do is to release a report on each one of the cities' hearings, and later on create a national report where we are going to explore what are the commonalities, how this machine was started here in Los Angeles and continue to be experimented in different cities, and how they are continuing to escalate and make, using all the funding that Congress just approved, an additional $70 billion to continue building detention centers and this oppressive machine, this terror machine, that what you are going to read in this report or you're going to read in future reports, it's torture. It's pretty much torture what is happening in these detention centers, and we are paying this with taxpayer dollars.
That's right.
So, it's the bigger debate in which this is being captured is about immigration. But really, I think what we're witnessing is something bigger. As both of you shared, this is systemic. This is intentional. There is something bigger going on here. And Rochelle, you've now been to your third hearing. Help us understand, ultimately, what is this really about?
Well, immigration enforcement, I mean, what I think we have to be very honest about what we're seeing. That is not immigration enforcement, right? The taking of people, the disappearing of people, the families that are torn apart, that is not immigration enforcement. I want to ground us in some facts. There are about 400,000 people that have been taken since the beginning of the Trump administration. And that has impacted 145,000 US citizen children that are without one of their parents because of those raids. There are 22,000 children, US citizen children, who do not have either of their parents in the household. That's family separation. It is not about enforcement. This is about cruelty. It's about control. It's about determining who gets civil rights in this country. It's about determining who is a human being under the law. And all of it is happening at a time when our country is changing significantly in our demographics. The Latino community is growing. I'm a Texan. We're 40% of the population there. California has a huge Mexican-American population. There are Latinos all over this country. And it is about deciding who gets to be a citizen and who gets to be a person under the law. And we all know that no matter whether you are a citizen or not, the Constitution applies to you. Due process applies to you. So this is about the government controlling us. It's about controlling who we are, what kind of rights we have. And it's something that has happened in history many, many times. And part of the people's record is about ensuring that we don't forget. I feel like too often there have been these moments in history that we forget have happened. Mexican Americans were deported en masse. Over 1 million Mexican and Mexican Americans were deported in the 1930s, again in the 1950s. And sandwiched right in between it was the Bracero program. So it was a guest worker program that brought 4 million plus workers from Mexico to work the fields in the United States. So it's always been about our labor. They want our labor, but not our people. They want our food, but not our families. That's how they treat us. And this is the civil rights issue of this era, is immigration. Because I can get picked up. I'm a fifth generation Texan. It doesn't matter. My children. So we need to act with urgency. We need to see this moment with urgency. And fighting back is about telling our stories and demanding more from everyone.
That's right. It was particularly powerful to hear from Chicanos born in the East Side who were just minding their own business and then suddenly being detained. Their rights were literally violated, and realizing that it doesn't matter, that being brown was enough, and doesn't matter how long you've been here, whether you speak English or Spanish, that your crime was being brown. That was throughout the day we heard that. For philanthropy, Frankie, and for the nonprofit sector, our role is to kind of fill in the gaps of government, where government has failed or chooses not to respond to harms in our community, or to create innovation. We're in a different moment now where it is the government that is creating harm, where the government is intentionally trying to control and to send a message of who belongs and who doesn't belong. So how should philanthropy and the nonprofit sector respond to this moment that perhaps is different to the way we're used to responding to filling gaps?
I want to also add to this question the fact that the federal government right now are actively trying to destabilize the entire direct service providers nonprofit sector. Many of us in this room are aware of the new OMB rule that they are trying to get approved, that Trump appointee will be the person that will decide whether or not federal funding can go to a nonprofit organization based on the fact that if these organizations are in accordance to all the priorities of the president. That will means that probably 100% of the people in this room will be automatically ineligible to continue providing services with federal funding. This is an attack on those that are trying to preserve civil rights, voting rights, fighting misinformation, providing essential services. So the moment is now to, as our friends very well, Angelica Salas and Rudy Espinosa very well said at the beginning of this conference in the opening plenary, it is not the time to be on the sidelines. It is a time to not have paralysis of analysis. It is not time to just wait for a feasibility study or waiting for the next round of traditional grant making. It is a time of emulating the work that we were able to do. Rochelle coming to us, the Miranda Family Fund, Hispanic Federation, Latino Victory, coming together, the Texas Civil Rights Projects, coming together and said, we need to do this. We need to be nimble. We need to be able to be flexible in making sure that the urgency is right now. I'm going to take the privilege of turning this back to you, Miguel. The California Community Foundation, you have been leading in these moment and making decisions that are timely and effective. Your campaign, Am I Next, the funding decisions that you have made, the collaborations that you have, the tables that you have created, it is about making real decisions in real time because we cannot continue waiting. And these people's hearings is an attempt to make sure that all of these is used later on for research, for advocacy, for mobilization, and ultimately, we will have a new Congress. And we want to take this in front of Congress for not only accountability, but for new policy and even redistribution of some of these funds that have been already approved. They need to reallocate that to where American people really need to. So this is a time in which we just need to feel the call for action and act now.
Thank you, Frankie. So Rochelle, this is your career, this is your life's work, civil rights. You've been fighting this fight for many years, and now, you know, the universe brought you to this role at such a critical time, a role that some are trying to remove her from. She can't say it, but I'll say it. So we all need to stand by her right now more than ever, and her leadership. So help us understand from the many, many stories that you've heard, from the cases that you are fighting, from a systems perspective, what's really happening here? How are these rights systemically being eroded? What is the patterns that you have witnessed time and time again? And what does this look like 4 years from now, 5 years from now, if this trajectory continues?
Yeah. I mean, as a starting point, civil rights always is eroded by starting with the most vulnerable. And immigrant communities have always been the most vulnerable. There are a few things that I have seen as patterns. One of them is surveillance. Changes in surveillance and the way that it is being used, the racial profiling that has been become unfettered after the Vasquez v. Perdomo case, which originated here in California, and y'all are doing everything you can to fight back, which is just absolutely critical. But when it comes to racial profiling, I mean, we've seen that everywhere. We saw it in Minneapolis. We saw that in Chicago. We saw it here in LA. We see it every day in Texas, all over the country, this unfettered racial profiling. There are no controls around that. And the Supreme Court has just given carte blanche to it with the Kavanaugh stops that we're seeing. The surveillance issues, the the fact that so the Commission on Civil Rights in 2024 published a report on facial recognition technology and the civil rights implications of it. The federal government does not have any safeguards for the use of facial recognition technology. And I want that to sink in. DHS, the Department of Homeland Security, Customs and Border Protection, HUD, Housing and Urban Development, none of them have any kind of safeguards for how that is being used. And we know that CBP has been taking people's photos. They've been following people. They find out where they live. And in Minnesota, we heard from people that had unmarked cars parked in front of their homes, and their children were asking, "Hey, Daddy, there's this car outside. I don't know what's going on." And it's all because of the constitutional observing. It's all because someone is exercising their First Amendment rights to document, to watch, to post publicly what is happening. And once those people are scared, once all of us are scared to exercise our First Amendment rights, it's all over, right? Because there's no one left to document it. So those are the two main issues that I've been seeing. And then the detention issue. I mean, you heard yesterday was just devastating. The conditions in these facilities is abhorrent. Lack of food, keeping people in rooms that the lights are on 24 hours a day, moving them from city to city. I mean, we heard testimony where people were moved like 6 times to different states, to New Mexico, to Texas. They always end up in Texas, sadly. Texas has the most detention centers of any state in this country. And that system itself, if it's allowed to expand, could be really detrimental to the whole system. And so I do have to name that there are a lot of efforts happening in Texas to stop the expansion of these facilities. Cities are stepping up, and they're saying, no, you are not going to buy a warehouse and put people in it like cattle. You've got organizations like mine that are litigating against that and trying to get people out of detention and shutting down Dilley, because we have to shut down Dilley. We have to do it, and we have to do it now. But I can go on and on and on, but those are the main things that I am seeing, and those are the arteries of the problem, the heart of the problem.
I mean, it's an apparatus that's being built, and it's not just about immigrants. Let's be clear, and it's about dissent and anyone who is challenging the system, including many of us in this room. You've now heard dozens and dozens of people tell their stories, and I really respect the caring in which you do that, having sat with you for 6 hours yesterday. Is there one particular story that you carry, that you think about, that really kind of demonstrates to you the level of cruelty that this apparatus is engaged in?
I mean, there's so many, and I'll invite you to, but I do want to just share, I think Liam Ramos is the one story that hit a lot of people's hearts. And I don't think people are fully aware that, so Liam Ramos was a little boy who was taken in Minnesota, and during the hearing, we heard from his school administrators. We heard from teachers. The impact on students and children is it's really devastating. I mean, you had teachers trying to get kids out of the buses into the building as quickly as possible, so that because they knew ICE agents were coming. I mean, they're already dealing with, school shooting drills. They're dealing with all these other things, and then on top of that, to be afraid of their own government. But Liam Ramos, I mean, hearing from his teachers, knowing that the federal government is still trying to lock him up. The Texas Civil Rights Project is representing him in his appeal, because the government does not want to let it go. They want to make an example of him. And I don't think people know that is still happening, but he is just one child in a sea of children that have been impacted by this.
In Minneapolis and St. Paul, for me, the most shocking testimony was a direct service provider who had unmarked cars following him and his family. The harassment of just for doing their job, of spending time and resources of just harassing people who are doing, protecting, providing services, informing people. The testimony was so powerful that he was shaking while he was sharing his story. In Chicago, for me, was the visiting Little Village and hearing from small business owners that they say people are not coming, that they have no traffic after they had military style vehicles parading up and down and making sure that people understand we can come back at any time. And here in Los Angeles, seeing how people were moved from detention center to another detention center to another detention center in an effort for lawyers and families not being able to locate a human being. People being checked into hospitals with fake names so they cannot be located. People saying that they were forced to soil themselves because they were chained for hours. This is torture. This is systemic torture. And we probably will see this in a movie or in a streaming series, and he said that never happens here in the United States. It's happening right now. It's happening right now. Somebody that has to beg for a shower after days and days, denying the dignity, and then pushing you for 6 months until you say, I cannot stand this anymore. Even you have documentation, valid documentation to be in this country, but you say, I cannot stand it anymore, I need to self-deport. It is heartbreaking.
Indeed. You know, sadly, this is very much part of our country's history. We're celebrating our 250th in next month. And in many ways, what we're experiencing for me really demonstrates how strong the muscle memory is. It doesn't take very much for the experience of enslavement showing up again, or the incarceration of Japanese Americans. Time and time again in this nation's history, this muscle memory shows up, and we're in one of those moments. So I think about, you know, we often ask ourselves, what would have done during those times if we were here during the incarceration of Japanese Americans? How would we have reacted? And, you know, there were two organizations at that time that showed up: the Quakers and the ACLU. Everyone else stood in the sidelines and watched. And now we have an infrastructure. So as you think about history and the stories that will be told about this moment into the future, what are the two different scenarios where it could go, and what role do the people in this room have in changing the trajectory of that history?
I'm an optimist. I know that the pendulum is going to swing. I know that these room full of people that really care and make time from their busy schedules to be here are all going to be part of making sure that the pendulum swings, and that we are going to correct this, and that we're going to go back, because the same way that we have moments in history where has been terrible moments in our history in this country, we also have moments that we have done a lot of progress and that we have done come together and we have done the right thing. So I'm hopeful that this effort is going to lead to more people being able to talk about what's going on, show their outrage, and show action. This is the moment for action. This is the moment in which we need to work all together to make sure that we're not afraid, that we need to be brave, that the same way that Chair Garza is here showing a lot of bravery, that many of our organizations have been singled out in investigations or attempts to intimidate us, the way that we have to work so hard with many of our boards to try to convince them that this is the right thing to do. The Federation, we didn't change our work and mission in 2016. We didn't change it in 2020. We're not going to change it now. We just need to stand our ground. And when in doubt, we just need to look back to our missions and commit to the work. But we also need help. We need help. Corporate donations are dwindling. We know that the nefarious cuts from the federal government are going to hit right after the midterms elections, right? So local government, state government, city governments are going to start dwindling also their funding next year. So what is going to do philanthropy now? This is the moment to act. And I know that we're going to look back at this moment and we're going to say we did the right thing and we came together and we changed the course of history.
I just want to echo that. I also think it's really important, and we didn't quite get to this, but the economic squeeze that's happening to our communities because of all these raids and the businesses that are suffering, that are mostly Latino owned across this country. I think right now is the time to lean in, as Frankie is saying, but also seek out new partnerships. Seek out the people that are on the ground doing the work, and seek it out in places that you wouldn't normally invest in, as red states. You know, there are a lot of people doing some really important groundwork that needs some partnership. And I know Frankie and I are available for conversations. If any of you would like to talk about what we are doing, the vision behind it, what our goals are, how you can get involved, please reach out to us. Because right now is the time for bold leadership, to act sin miedo, to fight and stand by our communities.
You know, for philanthropy in particular, you know, it's frustrating in that oftentimes we think about this as a program. And I can't tell you how many times I've heard from some of our colleagues say, well, we don't fund immigration. This is not about immigration, folks. This is about our democracy and the core American values that we stand for. And the thing that for me is the greatest amount of irony is that we're in a moment of time that those communities like ours and the African American community and others who haven't yet fully realized the benefits of this democracy, we are the ones that are going to have to save it. The responsibility falls on us to achieve the promise that we still haven't experienced fully. And philanthropy is privileged in the role that we play to take risk, to show boldness and courage, to break the silos and break from this the way that we think about issues. And this is an all hands on deck moment. So I really want to say thank you both for your visionary work, for being able to look around the corner and plan ahead to ensure that there's justice and accountability, and for being warriors of our community and our democracy. Please join me in thanking our two incredible panelists.
This concludes plenary